Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a kind of a larger segment for you guys. This will be our kind of Flieger follow-up, and today we're going to focus really on the Flieger watches in my collection. I know there's been a couple of people that have requested that I do something like a state of the collection, but honestly I just have too many watches and I don't know how I would even, I'd have to even consolidate them onto the one desk. There's too many. So I figure I can do segments like this where I'll actually just get a couple of different segments at a time where they're in decent sized groups, and then we can kind of look at things in mass. You can compare and contrast and just do a little bit of watch talking while we're at it. So today's segment is brought to you by Wrist Candy Watch Club. So big ups to them. Go ahead, feel free to pause here, guys. For those of you that don't know and aren't big, channel alumni or anything, the way I like to do my sponsored content, I don't do paid reviews. What I'll do instead, or secretive product placement, what I like to do is just send a big shout out, similar to, let's say you're watching, a car review channel or something like that. Basically, they'll say, hey, this is brought to you by, this coffee company or this, VPN server. Check them out. And it really has nothing to do with necessarily what's on the screen. So here, Wrist Candy Watch Club, essentially, they're really known for these right here, guys. These nylon NATO style straps, all different colors and textures. I grabbed these ones because they have stripes. They have kind of that military vibe. And today, of course, we're covering Fliegers. So if you're a fan of the channel, you support the channel, feel free to also support Wrist Candy Watch Club for sponsoring this particular segment. So with all that said, guys, to kind of keep this very simple, we're talking about pilot's watches. What type of pilot's watch, and that whole side of it. Of course, we're talking about Flieger watches, but some key common characteristics and design language you're looking for a pilot's watch is really that balance of legibility and functionality. A little bit about Fliegers for those of you who are just like, what is this word Flieger? It's German for like a pilot's watch, essentially a flyer. There was originally 5 manufacturers of Flieger watches, 4 German and 1 Swiss. In Germany, there was A. Lang & Son, Wempe, Lasher and Company, which ended up becoming Lako, and then also Walter Stores, which became Stowa, and then basically in smaller numbers, the Swiss International Watch Company, which is IWC. So those companies were the first to kind of pioneer these big 55 millimeter watches that strapped over your bomber jacket and when you climbed up into your fighter plane. But since then, basically German's pilot watches have carried on that flavor and that tradition. Some here are from the original 5 Flieger family, and some are much more modern and newer, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I did want to kind of share, compare, contrast, just give you guys kind of an idea for those of you that are looking for that space to fill. And guys, these aren't the only pilot watches that I own. These aren't the only German watches that I own, but these are the Germans' pilot watches that technically fall under the Flieger kind of moniker when you're thinking about them. So I'm kind of going to start from the oldest here, which is the Lako, and then one from Stowa. Another from Mühle Glashütte. Of course, I'm an American, American swine. So yeah, I'm not going to be pronouncing these with like extra. I say BMW. I don't say BMW, right? We're not in Germany, so don't get too upset if I'm not giving Sinn, if I don't Sinn it up sometimes. I'll try not to say Sinn. All right, that's about. Then we got Damasco, right? So these are the models, guys. We're gonna get them in hand, talk about some of the things that make them alike, some of the things that make them differently, making them different, and then just have a little bit of chat, and then maybe you guys will throw us some comments in the space below, and we can get some back and forths if you have any questions. But hopefully, what I'll do is kind of give you guys a peek behind the curtain. and also some personal, basically some personal stories with these watches, because I own these. I'm not like a lot of watch reviewers that are out there that majoritarily deal with loaners or free samples. The majority of my videos on my channel are watches that I've purchased over the years. I'm not typically a flipper, so I end up having them and I keep them, so I can kind of give you a better insight as to what it's like to own these watches over time. So it's nice for me to be able to have a sponsor like Wrist Candy Watch Club that enables me to share some of these long time stories with you guys. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get these pieces in hand. All right, guys, so we're gonna go ahead and start with this beautiful Lako. Now, Lako was actually one of the original 5. They were previously known as Lasher and Company, which translates over to shorten that, and it's Lako now, right? They were founded back in 1925. This is their Munster model, and this particular finish on it is the blue hour finish. So that's why you do see the blue dial, this beautiful 2-piece nylon strap here, really gorgeous. One thing to also mention is these are all factory straps that I have on here. I don't necessarily wear them all on their factory straps, but I figured for the sake of the video, it would be nice to kind of feature them on their OEM equipment as the original manufacturers intended. So this model is a 42, which is actually, I think quite, it still is within that traditional pilot's watch. Of course, they started out much larger, closer to the 55 millimeter range, but nobody's wearing a huge 55 millimeter watch anymore, at least not very tastefully at this time. So 42, I think for this type of watch with as expansive of dial as it is, it actually really fits and makes sense. We have domed sapphire crystal, as you can see, really nice. It's the inner AR coating. We got a 20 millimeter lug width here, 13 millimeter thickness, 50 millimeters lug to lug, with that really interesting case shape. I want to start here is because this is how old school that Lako has really carried over. They really have that old school design. It looks like it's a case with some, basically the lugs got added on to it, right? Because they originally were using, clocks, basically pocket watches, and then turned them into basically wristwatches. So basically, Fliegers were some of the first wrist watches. So you can see back then, not too much thought went into it besides, hey, how can I get a strap onto there so I can wrap this thing around the wrist? And as you can see on my 7 1/4 inch wrist, still wears quite nice. It's big, bold, but I think the color scheme on here is so nice and so well suited, with this gray, and then of course the bead blasted finish on the case. The depth rating on here is only 5 atmospheres or 50 meters of water resistance. It uses a Laco 24, which is essentially an ETA 2824. So really nice. This thing's gorgeous. It has really great winding action. So the movement in here has really been well taken care of. And you can see the blued hands. This thing is absolutely gorgeous. It's kind of, for me, a nice blend of the old and the new, right? Very traditional as far as the case lines go and everything, and even the proportions to a certain sense, but then also very modern in the aesthetic with this blue hour model. So really big fan of that. Now, we can't really mention, Lako without talking about Stowa or Stowa. They were founded in 1927. This is their Flieger Classic model. So as you can see, again, another very similar dial and whatnot, but here the case is a bit more modern, a bit more of a modern take, and then also you do have the classic onion crown. This one is 40 millimeters, no date, no logo, so really bare bones, stripped down. As you can see, of course, again, steel case. This one is only 10.2 millimeters thick, or should I say thin, because this thing is extremely thin. If you look at that mid case, a lot of the thickness here is actually from the bezel, so it really wears ultra thin, and it has a beautiful wrap and a drape around the wrist. And you can see this is the Stowa strap that came with it. You know, not great with my, you know, more tan skin tone, but I think it's very representative of kind of a modern vintage affair that they were going for. As you can see, really gorgeous, you know, tooling here on the milled clasp. Really great hardware, fantastic. I would probably, if I go do it again, I probably would have made sure to get the black strap model, but I think this brown is has quite a look to it, especially with the blued hands and the way that everything bounces off. Of course, this is sapphire. Actually, all these watches have sapphire crystals on them, and I want to say even, yeah, they all have AR coating and whatnot as well. So Stowa, really nice and extremely classic. Here you get the display case back though, and the nice thing is what they've done is a bit of a play on the classic case back here, where they've actually put the data on a custom rotor that's meant to look like a sealed case back. So I think that's really cool. Very similar layout and whatnot. This one being more true to the original, this one being just a little step away from the original, but in a way that is really still quite handsome, and now you can actually get a little bit of enjoyment out of, out of the rest of the case, and the of course that beautiful top grade ETA movement with full decorations, perlage, and even some blued screws in there. So really nice from that standpoint. All right, next, I'm sure I'm getting this wrong, Mühle Glashütte. These were also out of 1927. This was when they first made their wristwatches, and this is their Terrasport model. The Terrasport 2, also stainless steel. This one's 40 millimeters by 10, and then only 48 millimeters lug to lug as well. So very similar in dimensions to the Stowa here, as you can see. Even the spacing on the dial is actually quite similar. So the thinness is again also quite similar. I'll try to get it to ignore the watches in the background. Here we go. As you can see, the proportions are just playing a little bit differently, with the Stowa being more bezel heavy, here being a little bit lower on the bezel, but then a little bit bigger on the case back. So as you can see here, absolutely gorgeous. I love this model. It's so clean, so classic, just really, really well balanced. And you can see it has this great, very traditional, you know, 5-link bracelet. Everything is very solid. You have this epic movement here, guys. This is actually a modified Mühle spec SW200 with a woodpecker neck regulator. So instead of your basic little screw type of adjustments you can make, here you can, let me get it in there. There you go. As you can see here, you get a nice idea of actually just how fine the adjustments can be made on this movement. So you can really, really fine tune it. This thing is actually gorgeous. I'd say probably it might be my favorite movement out of the bunch here. And it's funny because it's a Solita movement, and many people just prefer ETA in general, just kind of at face value. But of course, this is much more customized than your typical Solita. Even the rotor, it's not like Oris where they just throw a little red paint onto the rotor and do nothing else. Here, guys, this thing is absolutely worked from a functional standpoint, as well as you know, an aesthetic standpoint. So you do have the custom rotor, custom finishes and decoration, really gorgeous. And then you have this deployant clasp there, really nice. Now, we'll also get into this little guy from Sinn. This is the 556. So I have two of them here. One is a 556i, and the other is a 556a. This is the I, but this is the IB. So this is it has indices essentially, and then the B is for blue. So we actually do have even applied indices here, as you can see. No date model, also on a 5-link style bracelet, but much sharper as far as kind of the shape and longer in the link here. The finishing, I think, is quite nice. I think it's a cut below the Mühle. The clasp, though, I think is something very special. If you take a look, there's nothing about this one that is, you know, a part spin. This is all very custom, very well engineered. You can even see that it has screw pins as thin and as fine as these links are. So really well engineered. I just think the finishing level isn't quite up to the same level, but the engineering and whatnot is I think definitely very close. The nice thing about these Zinns are that they actually have 200 meters of water resistance. Oh, what I didn't mention is that Zinn was founded in 1961. So this is their, you know, they're much newer in comparison to this half of the screen, and then we'll end with the newest comer here being the Damasco. But man, this thing is gorgeous. It's a great piece. It's only 38.5 millimeters. It has an 11 millimeter thickness and a 45.6 lug to lug, but it does have a display case back and 200 meters of water resistance. So although this is, you know, really specified as a pilot's watch, it really blends into the kind of that everyday adventurer's watch because of the higher level of water resistance, the screw down crown. This thing's gorgeous. And then you do have, of course, that top grade ETA 2824, even with the gold decoed rotor, which looks really great. So very nice. And you also get drilled lugs, so this thing can be quite a strap monster. I actually typically wear this one on a strap, although the bracelet is nice. I think this blue dial just plays really well on gray straps, similar to the Lako here as far as that color play option goes. Now, moving on to the other Zinn, this is the one that probably most of you will recognize. This thing is a legend kind of in its own right, the Zinn 556A, or A for Arabic numerals, and then this is on their H-link bracelet, and this one is one of the more modern ones they have here, as you can see, with these beautiful hex screws there. So really nice. The clasp is stamped, though here just on the clasp portion, and then the underneath folding, of course, is all milled. There's even a kind of weird, I guess you could call it a dive extension option that is fully milled as well. Or maybe if you want to put this puppy over your flight coat, you would have a little extra room to get it over the sleeve of a, you know, of a sweater or a flight jacket. But you can tell this is really what Zinn's known for, is that instrumental typeface there. Really beautiful. You have that little hidden date there, offset, but still actually parallel with the rest of the font and text, which I can definitely appreciate. It is quite small. Some people would rather it just wasn't there, but I think it's a nice thing that you do have the date when you're looking for it, and when you're not looking for it, you really don't tend to notice it there. So it's, for me, some people might take that as an afterthought, but I think it was actually them trying to be a little bit more thoughtful, especially considering that they did the date window parallel to the rest of the text and numerals. So really gorgeous, and of course generally it's the same specs as everything as the other 556 we saw. Really the main difference is going to be this really nice flat matte black dial there, and then the printed indices versus the applied on that particular model. There's also a 556i that's really well known as well, that has a gloss dial, all printed and whatnot, and I think that one, the dial proportions almost have a little bit better breathing space, so this one is going to read a little bit smaller on the wrist versus the 556i. So Really nice. I mean, as you can see, this is a beautiful H-link bracelet. I mean, nothing luxurious about it. It's not like they added a bunch of trick beveling or anything like that, but it's just really overbuilt. It's super solid. You know, this is really what you can expect from Sinn. It's definitely all about that functional, you know, capability. That's really where it goes over the top. Is in its functionality, not necessarily in its finishing. But it is still quite well put together and whatnot. It's just, I think if you go into this with this idea that this thing is going to be, you know, comparable to some higher end German or even Swiss timepieces, you might be a little let down because of the more pedestrian working finish that you do see on these timepieces. Okay, so lastly we have this guy right here. Awesome piece right here, Damasco, founded in 1994, guys. I'm older than Damasco. Yes, this is the DS30 in submarine steel. It's 39 millimeters with a 9.9 millimeter thickness and a 47.3 lug to lug, 20 millimeter lug width there. Flat sapphire crystal. It does also have an inner and I believe an outer air coating as well. And I gotta say, in comparison to the Sinn here, it's held up better. The outer air coating here is completely unblemished versus here there's actually some micro little scratches and whatnot on it, which is disappointing. So that is an issue for some people. I love this watch here. They actually updated it. My model actually is one of from the first batch, which were only 10 bar or 100 meters of water resistance. These are actually made now with 20 atmospheres of water resistance or 200 meters. So on par as far as the depth rating with the Sinns here. The Damasco actually is now going to hold its own. Also, a screw down crown with tons of tech tied into here. Well, not only with just having that matte submarine steel, but also, you know, tricks with the crown where it's like self lubricating. You also do have the drilled lugs. This is actually a Damasco strap. This one is one that you will have to buy from Damasco. So I didn't switch this one off because it's also from them. I love this textured rubber strap here. I think it really gives it a more modern look, and it's a little bit cleaner because the one that this comes on is kind of has a vintageized feel, and it's gorgeous, don't get me wrong, but I think with like the ivory accent stitching with the really pure white typeface, it just, for me, it didn't really make sense, and this was just kind of a better fit. Excuse me. So there you have it, guys, from 1927 till actually 1925 till 1994. So there's quite a few differences you can kind of see here, but let's actually close this on some wrist shots. So we'll go ahead and get that going for you. Okay, guys, as you can see, we'll do two at a time here. We got the Lako and the Stowa. We got 42 versus 40. We have essentially the more traditional old school case versus the more modern kind of wrap around your wrist case. They're both on two-piece straps, one being nylon and a lot more modern, the other being on a beautiful leather, but definitely more on the traditional side. So as you can see, they both work really well, even apart from the specs. Like, you think about, okay, this thing has got long lugs. Look at that. It's even on my 7¼ inch wrist, you start thinking those lugs are a little bit long, but honestly, you don't really notice it too much. I'm wearing these a little bit higher on my wrist than I typically do, just because I know I'm a bit in the minority as far as wearing my watches kind of past this little wrist knuckle there, bone. Because I like to wear my watches a little bit looser. So I typically do, but I figured for this classic kind of face-off that I would show them, and is, you know, kind of the same reasons why I paired them back on their factory straps, kind of on their most neutral kind of look, to kind of just please the most amount of people there. And sorry I couldn't grow more hair on my arm. But for those of you with hairy arms that want to know what these look like on hairy arms. My ethnicity, unfortunately, we weren't blessed with hairy arms. So yeah, these look great, wear great, but definitely very different. So feel free to kind of pause the camera where you will. Beautiful. Obviously those A dials definitely speak a similar language. The pop of blue on those heat treated blued hands also speak a very particular type of language that is really translated well. So I think when you think about these kind of beautiful kind of original Fliegers that have made it to today, these are definitely two great options for you. And of course, if you want to go full on traditional, you can also get this, you know, with a black dial and whatnot on a traditional black strap. And then here you can get this with all types of different, you can get white dial, blue dial, gray dials. Stowa definitely offers you a lot of different options from those standpoints as well. So let's go ahead and move on to the next round. All right, guys, now you're going to see kind of the battle of the 5-link bracelet. Of course, these ones, you know, unfortunately, I'm not gonna add extra links in, or, you know, to get them to where they're gonna ride a little bit higher up. I typically wear them a little bit, you know, further down the wrist, and I'm also wear them on my right wrist typically. So this is actually kind of weird to have a bracelet on this wrist. But as you can see, the Mühle and the Sinn, they do have that similar light play. Look at the bracelet in the light, the way it glides over the beautiful finishing there. I do feel like, as far as the finishing goes, the Mühle definitely has it a bit outmatched. And then the movement, I think, of course, this thing is really well done on a technical level. Versus the Sinn, they kind of rely a little bit more on ETA doing a nice job with this particular movement. But here, you can see more of a contrast of that very beautiful, modern, and versatile look. Even with the sizing of it being a little bit smaller, you can almost consider it a little bit more dressed up as well. Versus here, this is definitely more of a very pure sports watch. But I do like the symmetry here that's on both of these watches, of course with the no date, and then here with the very nicely integrated date at the 3 o'clock, but it's not cutting anything out. All they did is very ever so slightly push that 3 out a little bit. And you might have never noticed that without me telling you. So really nice, I think, really great balancing with the text on the dial as well. Same here. And then you actually even have the German spelling for automatic on both of these. So very nice. Wear very nice. Again, guys, you don't have to take my word for it. Just take a look on these 7 1/4 inch wrists. Maybe my left wrist might be a little bit bigger because I write with my left hand, so this might appear a little bit tighter. But yeah, guys, check them out. Sinn or Mühle on bracelet. Which one do you guys prefer for the 5 links? All right, let's move on to the next round. All right, final round. Here we have the Sinn 556A and the Damasco DS30. I think these actually do pair well pretty much against each other as far as kind of people that are cross shopping, because this thing is ultra versatile, guys, especially when you consider that these now have 200 meters water resistance, super balanced dial, very minimalist. Same here. You know, you get the 200 meters water resistance as well. Full on tool watches, guys, here with drilled lugs. Slim cases. I do find the proportions to be just a hair nicer on this Damasco. They're at 39 millimeters versus the 38.5. And it's not just the overall diameter, it's just really the dial spacing, the bezel to dial kind of ratio to body ratio. I just think, for me, this thing is just wearing a little bit nicer and rendering a hair nicer visually. So I think these guys look great. I think there are many people that will still prefer this bad boy, and just it's a classic with a lot of street cred, guys. I get that, but for me, this Damasco DS30, it's just something a little bit more special. You're not going to see them as often. Two, there's just a little bit more fun to it, and honestly, spec wise, it's probably a little bit more comparable to some more expensive Sinns versus this being Sinn's kind of entry level model. And what a hell of an entry level model to have, being the 556 line. I mean, that's a great starting point, and their watches only get more technologically savvy and feature rich as you kind of climb up that expense ladder. So really loving this piece. Love the crosshairs. I think it's really well balanced, really well spaced. It has a way of not feeling oversized, which I think is really nice, and can make things just a little bit more wearable when you're not really necessarily trying to have something that screams pilot's watch. You know, similar here, this could almost pass and makes a lot of people's lists for field watches, because it's just has such, you know, unique proportions and capabilities, and legibility. You get something very similar here, but with a very different, and for me, generally overall, a little bit more modern look. So let's actually sneak in some low light transition, some Lume shots, and we'll close this thing out. All right, guys, we'll go ahead and hit the lights. As you can see, same order as we originally laid these out, starting with the Lako, moving on to the Stowa, and then we got the Mühle, we got the two Sinns, and we close out with the Damasco. To me, guys, you know, the Stowa and the Lako with that C3 application, definitely very nice standouts. But a real surprise actually is the Damasco with that grade C1X1. It reads and renders much whiter in the daylight, but still quite green and quite potent in darkness. So that was definitely a very nice surprise, and that really helps with kind of that overall more kind of crossover sporty feel and vibe. Here we'll do some low light transition just to kind of give you guys an idea of how the colors and the finishing renders in less than optimal lighting conditions. As you can see there, as the light fades away, get that transitional lighting. You know, how legible are these still? I think they remain quite legible. Even in some harsh lighting here, you can see, go ahead and watch the way the light glides over the finishing on the links for the models with bracelets. For the models without, you can definitely just take a look at the case brushing and whatnot. Very, very nice. You can see very nice in the dark. Quite handsome. This medium lighting also quite good. Let's maybe put that down, then give you guys a little black light action here just to rejuvenate these and get a look at what exactly you're working with. I think these are really handsome pieces, guys. Big fan of pretty much every one of these. If I could do it all again, I probably wouldn't do too much different. Not that I can really think of. More so to save money versus to save wrist time, because I've had a great time with all of these timepieces, and they all suit kind of a different function for me, and that's kind of the fun of having a collection of watches. Yeah, for some people you might be thinking, I just need one pilot's watch. I think if you need one pilot's watch, it's a Flieger that's in this price range, you know, around $1,000, under $2,000. These are some really outstanding options to look at. I think for the traditionalists, you're going to get a lot of fun kind of over on that left-hand side. And then as you move on over to the right-hand side, you're going to get something that's a lot more modern and a little bit more versatile from that standpoint, but still gives you some great lineage and heritage and just the design language speak. It doesn't necessarily have to be from an older brand. You know, it can just be from a brand that does cool things. So with all that said, guys, I know this was a little bit of a long one, but you know what? That's what she said. So once again, big shout out to the team over at Wrist Candy Watch Club. Definitely check out their straps, guys. They're awesome supporters of the channel. If you guys support the channel, feel free to also support them by following the links down below. Definitely let me know what you guys think. Which is your favorite out of the bunch? what was missing, where would you have, you know, hey, would you trade all these right now for an IWC? Yeah, would I probably would. I probably would. But then I feel like this guy right here honestly offers so much value compared to a comparable IWC. And then this guy right here. So I think these are two kind of polar opposites. I think this one is probably the sweet spot for the traditional, the old school, very Germanic vibe. And then here, as far as the minimal, but also quite capable aesthetics, you could probably pair these two. I could probably take the rest out, and these two could live quite happily, and you can even get this in a blue dial as well. So, or this in a white dialed option. So there could also be some aesthetic changes as well, but I think those two are kind of opposite ends of the spectrum here. These two are definitely basically brothers. These are brothers. Sinn 556i versus 556a. This one just happens to be the kind of nicer one with applied indices and that beautiful blue sunray dial. So again, if you like the video, guys, please hit like, and if you're not, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys. Oh yeah, and definitely let me know what you think in the comments below.